Okay.
Ready? Okay. We're here with Mildred Kalish, who was born on St. Patrick's Day in 1922 on a farm near Garrison, Iowa in Benton County. Millie, as she's known to her friends, is a writer, author of Little Heathens, a memoir of growing up in Iowa during the Great Depression. She has taught English at several East Coast colleges and at the State University of Iowa in Iowa City. She is the mother of two, the grandmother of four, the great-grandmother of two, and she is a product of a one-room schoolhouse education back in Iowa. Today's date, for the record, is January 17th, 2011. We are speaking with Millie at the Palo Alto home of her son and daughter-in-law, Doug Kalish and Donna Bowling. And we're going to talk about her experiences as a student in a one-room schoolhouse. It was known as Monroe number 6. And you can read more about it in chapter 17 of Little Heathens, but today we have Millie herself to tell us about it. So we'll proceed with the interview.
Just one addition. I taught also at the University of Missouri at Columbus.
Okay.
Which I like. I like to put that in.
So you took what you learned in one-room schoolhouses and you spread it throughout the Midwest. Actually, throughout the whole country.
That's right.
I wanted to start with some facts and figures and numbers so we know where we were and when we were there before we get into some of the more qualitative questions about one-room schoolhouses, okay?
Are you going to use this?
I'm going to use the questions, but not in order.
Okay, okay. All right.
So we're going out of order.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, what years about were you at Monroe number 6?
Roughly between 1928 and 1936.
Okay, and what grades were that?
Of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But yeah, I have to qualify this. You can't talk about rural schools in Iowa during the 30s without talking also about the weather and the Depression. And that's an important thing because it enveloped our lives and it controlled our lives, actually. Those two things, the weather and the Depression, the Great Depression. Now, the Depression was worldwide, and it cast a pall over everything we did. It controlled everything we did. It not controlled, but it did permeate everything that we did. A little more about that. It just happened. See, when I started to in rural school, I came from a fatherless family, and my mother and her 4 children, my 2 brothers and my sister, my baby sister, came to live with my grandparents, who lived in Garrison, and they had just retired. And because of the terrible weather, we lived on the farm only from May until Christmas. And then at Christmas time, we bundled everything up and went into town and lived with Grandpa and Grandma and went to this little school in Garrison.
So Monroe number 6, where was that? Was that in town or in the country?
Monroe number 6 is the rural school in town. And it's called Monroe because we lived in Monroe Township. We lived in Iowa, in Benton County, in Monroe Township. And each township, every 2 miles, was a rural school. I don't know how many there were at that time, but if you lived on a certain side of the road, you went to Monroe number 7. If you lived on the opposite side, it was known Monroe number 6. And we lived on the right across the road from my cousins. And this is so rare that I cannot name you. I cannot think of in that entire county another time when 2 farmhouses were that close. Usually they were at least a half a mile, maybe 2 miles apart.
And you went to different schools?
And my cousins who lived on the south side of the road went to Monroe number 7, and my we went to Monroe number 6. Now that meant that Harold and Dean and Robert walked up to the corner and turned left, and they went south, so that the northern wind was at their backs. We went up, if we went by the road, up to the corner, and we left them and we turned north and had to face the north winds. And because of the severity of the weather at that time, they felt that it was too dangerous for us to face those north winds, because if you want to look at this is an
So tell me what months these are. What months of the year?
The months of the year, we went to town school from Christmas until May 18th. May 18th is corn planting day, which means all the schools have to be out because the kids were needed on the farm. And we started school right after Labor Day, the first day after Labor Day, and we went till Christmas. And that meant that you had one semester, we had one semester on the farm, going into the north winds, and then the other semester in the spring with Grandpa and Grandma in the Garrison School, which had all 12 grades from one, and all under one roof.
So in the winter, you were in Monroe number 6. It was really cold, and
Yes.
that was the one-room schoolhouse.
Yes.
And the semester started when, after Labor Day?
After Labor Day, but what you have to remember is that the winter, the worst of the winter began in January, February, and March. But we also had, in those days, and this has changed now, we had winter beginning sometimes at the end of October. But the weather was so varying at that time that I remember on Thanksgiving Day that the boys were out lying in their shirt sleeves on the lawn. It's that picture I have in Little Heathens of all my cousins and brothers, a good number of them, are lying out on the lawn to bask in the sun waiting for dinner to come, so that we had unbelievably blissful, the only word I can think of is halcyon, days in September and October. There's a poem, we learn lots of poetry in country school, and that's one of the things that I am so happy I did. There's a poem, there are 2 poems. And one is, oh, what is so rare as a day in June, then if ever are perfect days. Then heaven tries earth if she be in tune, and over her softly her warm ear lays. And then there's the counter. Oh, sun and moon and flowers of June, and all the stars together, all the birds together, ye cannot equal for 1 hour October's bright blue weather.
Well, that's beautiful. Now, did your teacher teach you that in school?
Yes. And I got to tell you, going to country school, easily as important as the school were the walks to country school. That walking, and every child I have ever encountered who's been to country school, remember the walks to country school.
So how far was it? How far was it from the house?
If we went the road, walking with our cousins up to the road, up to the corners where we split and went to Monroe number 6 and Monroe number 3, that was 1.5 miles. If we went between 1.5 miles and 1.5 miles, and if we went through the pastures, through the hazel brush, and along the creek, it was 1 mile.
And how long did that take you, your kids, so you could move fast?
Yes, but it depended. You see, that was why I say the walks to school were easily as educational as the education we got in rural school. Because when you say how long did it take, it depended on what was fun that day.
Oh.
We would walk, and as we walked, and this I think is part of the great fun of rural school and the value. The big kids taught us, there's a rabbit sitting over there. He's frozen and just walk right by him. And they would say, there's a ground squirrel picking his head up. And they would say, there's a bobolink, here's the bobolink. Or there's a bluebird building its nest in the oak fence post. Or there's a pheasant. And we knew, I mean, you learn so much about nature, like for instance, on pheasants. Pheasants are the big ringnecks, the one I'm talking about, the handsome, colorful bird. The pheasant will fly, because they'll wait till you're right there, and then they'll flutter you up so that you're too scared to pull a gun up, if you had a gun, which of course we didn't. But the pheasants will fly up, and with a great flutter, and then they'll drop down in a weed, say a stubble field. And if you think you're going over there and find that pheasant, you are so wrong. Because the first thing a pheasant will do is tuck his head down and run along the ground.
And this happened on a walk to school?
Yes. And you would see killdeer on the slope.
What's a killdeer?
A killdeer is a handsome, small bird that lives by the water, the ring around his neck, kind of a tiny bird. And he says, killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. And if you get close, anywhere close to his nest, and this, you see, the big kids taught us this. If you get close to the killdeer will go into a mode as if it's totally crippled. And it'll hang its leg back and its wing and act as if it's going to die and pull you away in the opposite place of his nest. So if you want to find a killdeer's nest, you don't follow the killdeer, you go back here, because that's where the nest is.
Okay, so you're walking along. Who's walking with you? You said big kids and little kids. How many kids are walking to school together?
Yes, this depends again. If it's just us, if we're going through the field, we are walking with Ossie Pingenot, who was from the family a half a mile up the road east of us. And Ossie was an orphan. No, he wasn't an orphan. His mother just abandoned the whole family. Kind of like Horton hatches the egg, you know. His mother abandoned the family, and the relatives each took a child. And Ossie was taken by the Irwin family.
And how old was Ossie?
Ossie was about 7.
And how old are you?
By this time, I'm about the same age,
Okay.
7 or 8 years old. And he would come down.
And your little kids? Your little kids?
We're still little kids
Okay.
at that time.
What-
8 is the cusp.
8 is the
8
cusp?
to 9 is the cusp. And you don't want to be on that.
Okay.
Because you're neither a big kid nor a little kid, and that puts you in danger. Because nobody likes you.
Okay, so what grade are you in if you're 8?
Third.
Third. Okay. Got
And so we would find things to do, either going to school or coming home. So you would expect, the folks would expect us home by, say, the folks would expect us home by 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'd leave school at 8 in the morning, and then we would get to school by 8:30
Okay.
or 8:40,
Mm-hmm.
and you like to get there early because you could play with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And playing with the rest of the kids was terribly important because we were so isolated, you know. And so getting there and playing pom pom pull away and all of our games.
Okay, what's pom pom pull away?
Pom pom pull
Let's
away.
play it right now. What is it?
Pom pom pull away is you have to stand. You stand by a post, and I'm trying to remember. Not exactly. You can hardly remember how we played pom pom pull away. You'd stand by a post, and the rest of the kids would say pom pom pull away, come away, or I'll pull you away, and they had to run to another post, and they had to dodge you, and you had to touch them. And if the person who touched him got to be the one at the...
Okay, so it's kind of like Tag-Grit, but a little more complicated. And where were these posts? Were they in the school yard?
We had a one hitching post, and then another thing that dealt with the post was the corner post of the schoolyard, which fenced us in. All schoolyards were fenced in on at least 3 sides, probably never 4, but 3 sides. And the fences were woven wire fences with the top one of barbed wire that went around. But then you would run from the hitching post to the
So before you get into the building and into the classroom, I want to ask a few more questions about that walk. What are you carrying when you're walking to school?
Oh, that's terribly important. We're carrying dinner pails, or dinner buckets, or lunch pails, whichever. We called ours dinner pails. Some kids called them lunch pails, or we called them dinner buckets. And they were a variety of dinner pails. Dinner, of course, in the farm is the noonday. And our dinner pails were old, emptied molasses or sorghum, a gallon about this high, with a wire bale over the top. And that was enough for 2 people, but we had a half a gallon corn syrup, and the corn syrup was white, which we had both sorghum and molasses, which was dark.
So it's made out of tin?
10 pails. 10 pails with a bale. 10 pails with a wire bale.
Okay. And is it a white tin pail or metal looking?
Metal. And the white syrup pail was a half a gallon, tin pail with a bale. The sorghum and the molasses were gallon pails. And some kids who were wealthy, better off than we were, had long, oblong, real dinner buckets. And they were oblong, and they had a black, and they had a curved top, and in that curved top was a real vacuum bottle.
Oh my goodness.
A real vacuum bottle. And that was fine until they dropped it, and it was glass inside, and they'd smash it to smithereens. But in that dinner pail.
Now, did you have your name on the dinner pail, or it didn't matter?
No, everybody knew.
Okay.
Everybody knew. Everybody knew whose was whose. The dinner pail, and so much is flooding in at this point, I don't know quite where to start, because it occurs to me how nice the big kids were to us little kids as we walked in the snow. They would carry our dinner buckets, because little kids would drag ours in the snow. Anyway, that's
So tell me what's in the bucket.
The bucket is always a sandwich, and the sandwich would have been made of homemade bread, fried pork tenderloin, with homemade chili, which is the equivalent of salsa. Tastes exactly like salsa without the comino seed.
Right.
Because we didn't have comino, but we had red peppers, green peppers, tomatoes, and cinnamon.
Oh, sounds delicious.
It was absolutely fantastic. We would have had sometimes sliced beef, cold sliced sliced pork. So these are sandwiches. You'd have perhaps a cupcake, a couple of either walnut cookies, oatmeal cookies, sugar cookies, applesauce cake. You'd have that, and sometimes a slice of apple pie or not gooseberry at that time of the year. We would have cherries, ground cherries.
So did you trade your lunches? Were the Armstrong lunches better than the other kids' lunches?
Well, it depended. The thing that we all absolutely craved and would trade our grandmothers for, including our lunch, were peanut butter sandwiches on this awful Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread was coveted by all, and it couldn't hold the candle to our homemade bread when I think of how we would trade this marvelous, nourishing, whole wheat, homemade bread, crusty and crisp and flavorful, to this awful Wonder Bread.
So what was the appeal of the Wonder Bread?
It had peanut butter. It was store-bought.
Oh, store-bought. Okay.
Anything store-bought is superior to homemade. And it had peanut butter in it. Peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and grape jelly sandwiches. And that was, you trade your eye teeth for
And
that.
what was the teacher?
Hold it.
Okay, so we were talking about sandwiches and lunches, and we both said we can hardly wait for lunch, and that's something that continues to this day. We still like lunch. I wanted to ask what the teacher would have for lunch. Do you remember?
Oh yes, the teacher, because the teacher lived with a family that lived but about a quarter of a mile from the house, from the schoolhouse. She had the same thing that the two kids had. That was Beverly and Harold Moore. And she would have the same kind of things. She'd just have, her lunch was exactly like ours. As far as I know, I never saw any teacher drink coffee.